It was an afternoon that seemed like any other by the lonely river. The waters flowed calmly, reflecting the peaceful blue sky and lazy clouds drifting by, as if they too were enjoying the pleasant weather. In the midst of it all, Zika, a sturdy green frog, was relaxing with his back legs stretched out and his eyes half closed, savoring the cool shade of a large water lily leaf. He was known by all the forest's inhabitants for his caution, perhaps even a touch of suspicion, but also for his friendliness and willingness to help others. Zika enjoyed being there under that leaf, where he could watch the fish swimming, see the birds flying by, and listen to the rustling of the surrounding trees. He was a bit of a local philosopher, always ready to reflect on life and tell his stories. Many animals came to him to hear his opinions and seek advice. After all, Zika knew things, and no one could deny that. That day, Zika was so engrossed in his thoughts that he almost didn't notice a somewhat unexpected presence approaching. A dark brown scorpion with a sharp tail and slightly gleaming eyes was crawling slowly over the stones. This was Leo, a well-known scorpion in the woods. He was famous for his eloquence and ability to charm other animals, but he also had a reputation for causing trouble. It was no surprise that the creatures preferred to keep a certain distance from him. Leo stopped next to Zika and cleared his throat, trying to get his attention. The frog opened his eyes slowly, sizing up the scorpion with a wary look. He already knew that Leo never appeared without a reason, especially without needing something. After all, no one sought out Zika without a good reason. "Great Zika, what an honor to find you on this beautiful afternoon," Leo said with a voice full of charm and forced friendliness. He moved a bit closer, trying to seem harmless, but keeping his tail well hidden to avoid frightening the frog. Zika responded with a slight nod, waiting to see where this would go. "Listen, my friend," Leo began, casting a pleading look. "I'm in a bit of a bind. I need to get to the other side of the river urgently. You know, an important meeting, something I can't delay. But, well, there's a small problem." Leo paused dramatically, looking at Zika with a carefully rehearsed expression of despair. "I can't swim, Zika. And if I try to cross the river on my own, you know what happens." Zika sighed and looked around, as if trying to find an excuse to leave. He knew exactly where Leo was going with this, but he wasn't in any hurry to respond. "And what does that have to do with me, Leo?" he asked, a bit impatiently but keeping a friendly tone. After all, he didn't want to offend the scorpion. A reputation was a reputation, and Zika already knew that Leo's tongue was as sharp as his tail. Leo sighed, casting a supplicant look. "Well, Zika, I thought maybe you could give me a ride. Just to the other side, nothing more. I'll hop on your back, and problem solved. And of course, I promise I won't sting you. Why would I do that, after all? If I stung you, we'd both go to the bottom of the river. It'd be madness. We're both smart. We know that doesn't make sense." The frog wasn't convinced so easily. He looked at the scorpion with an expression of someone who'd heard this kind of talk before. After all, Zika wasn't foolish and had his reasons for being cautious. With an air of genuinely pondering the request, he replied, "Leo, scorpions are known for their treacherous nature. Everyone knows that. If you sting me, we'll sink together. But how can I be sure you'll really keep that promise?" Leo then placed one of his claws on his chest in a dramatic gesture, as if about to swear solemnly. "My dear Zika, I give you my word. You're a wise friend, and I wouldn't do that. There'd be no advantage for me if I did such a thing. Besides, I need to reach the other side. My life depends on it. Trust me just this once." The frog looked into the scorpion's eyes, trying to decipher if there was any truth behind the honeyed words. Part of him shouted not to give in, not to risk his life for a creature of questionable reputation. But at the same time, he also had a kind heart and always tried to help others. "All right, Leo," sighed the frog, still a bit reluctant, "I'll help you. But remember, if I sense anything strange, any sign that you're going to hurt me, we both know what happens." Leo smiled, pleased with the response, and carefully climbed onto Zika's back. The frog took a deep breath and began to swim, feeling the weight of the scorpion on his back and trying to keep his mind focused on the crossing. He remained alert, ready to react if something went wrong, but for now, he made an effort to trust Leo, at least a little. Little did Zika know that this crossing held more than just a peaceful journey, but he would learn that the hard way. As Zika began to swim with Leo on his back, he focused on crossing the river carefully. The current was strong in some parts, and the crossing wouldn't be exactly easy. But for an experienced frog like him, that wasn't a problem. What truly worried him was the unexpected passenger he was carrying. As he paddled slowly, trying to keep his balance, Zika kept his ears and senses alert for any sudden movement from Leo. Though he had agreed to help, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. After all, he knew very well the reputation of scorpions, and deep down, he knew that trusting Leo might be a mistake. Leo, on the other hand, seemed completely calm and satisfied with the situation. He observed the landscape, watching the riverbank fade behind and the opposite bank gradually come into view. "See, Zika," he said, attempting to break the silence that hovered between the two. "I knew I could trust you. It's good to know there are still animals willing to help others in this world." Zika didn't respond immediately. He continued focused on his task, rowing firmly, but couldn't help a cautious reply. "Trust is a serious thing, Leo. And in your case, I confess it's hard to trust, no matter how much I try." Leo chuckled, as if trying to reassure the frog. "Oh, come on, my friend. Do you really think I'd do something as stupid as stinging you? That wouldn't make any sense. We'd both go to the bottom." "I'm not dumb, Zika. I know what I'm doing." The frog only murmured in response, still suspicious but trying to keep the peace. They continued the crossing, and with each stroke, Zika got closer to the other shore. The silence between them returned, but this time it was heavier, almost as if both knew that something was about to happen. And then midway, something changed. Zika felt a slight movement on his back, and a shiver ran down his spine. He turned his head slightly, only to see Leo's tail moving slowly and deliberately. A warning signal lit up in his mind, and he tried to speed up the crossing, but the water was deep, and the current gently carried them. There was no quick escape. "Leo, what are you doing?" Zika asked, his voice filled with apprehension. He knew something was wrong but still tried to remain calm. Leo, meanwhile, seemed to be in a kind of trance. His gaze was fixed, and the tip of his tail swayed slowly, as if waiting for the right moment to act. "Oh, Zika. I can't explain," Leo said, almost with sadness in his voice. "I really didn't want to do this. But..." Before Zika could react, he felt a sharp pain in his back. The sting was quick and precise, and the venom quickly spread through the frog's body. He gasped, surprised and outraged, as his body began to weaken. With a heavy heart and blurred vision, he turned his head once more to look at Leo. "Why, Leo?" Zika asked, his voice faint. "You knew this would kill us. You knew we wouldn't survive if you stung me. Why did you do it?" Leo looked at him with a mix of regret and resignation. "I don't know, Zika. It's my nature. I can't help it." Zika felt his strength fading. He tried to swim, tried to resist, but the venom was powerful and swift. As he slowly sank, his last thoughts were frustration and sadness, realizing that, as much as he wanted to believe others could change, sometimes nature was something even the sincerest promises couldn't alter. And so, as the river's waters began to engulf them both, Zika and Leo sank together, victims not only of circumstances but of what they carried within themselves. As Zika and Leo sank, the frog felt his strength diminish with every second. The venom coursed through his body, leaving him weaker and weaker, but his mind, though hazy, still tried to make sense of what had happened. He never imagined that his compassion and trust could lead him to such a sad fate. Yet, amid the pain and despair, Zika sought to understand Leo's actions. "Leo," murmured the frog with the little voice he had left, "it doesn't make sense. You knew what would happen if you stung me. We both knew we'd sink together. So why did you do it?" Leo, who also felt the weight of his mistake and the impending darkness, only sighed, his gaze distant and empty, as if finally realizing how much that choice would affect him too. "Zika," he began in a calmer, almost regretful tone, "I really didn't want to do this. Believe it or not, I thought I could control this urge, that I could set my nature aside, just for this moment. But, well, the truth is I couldn't." The frog, his eyes half open, tried to listen to every word, absorbing what the scorpion was saying. He knew that, in his final moments, there was no longer any use in worrying or getting angry with Leo. All he wanted was to understand, to find some explanation, however small, that justified this ending. However, upon hearing the scorpion's answer, Zika began to realize that perhaps the explanation was something simple, even inevitable. As the water surrounded them and their strength ebbed away, the frog reflected on how sometimes people's choices are guided not by logic, but by who they truly are deep inside. He remembered other stories he'd heard, of other animals who tried to act against their nature and failed, for in some cases, this nature was stronger than any promise or conscious decision. This was a hard lesson to learn, especially under such circumstances. For Zika, it was almost unbelievable that such a simple choice could lead him to this end. But at the same time, he understood that this was the reality for many. No matter how much someone may promise, swear, or even believe they can change, the truth is that there are aspects of ourselves that are deeply rooted. So there, in the depths of the river, Zika glimpsed a bitter yet wise lesson. One cannot expect everyone to act differently from who they truly are. As much as someone may want or need to change, certain impulses, certain traits, are practically unchangeable, even if they bring tragic consequences. Realizing this, Zika, in his last thoughts, only wished that, if someday other animals heard his story, they could learn this same lesson without having to go through the suffering he endured. As the cold water of the river enveloped them more and more, Zika allowed himself to be carried away by the tranquility that acceptance brought. His eyes blinked slowly, and he felt his body growing heavier, but there was a strange calm in understanding the inevitable. Beside him, Leo, the scorpion, seemed to finally realize the extent of his actions, although it was too late for any regret. He looked at Zika with an expression that mixed sadness and bitter resignation. "Zika," said Leo, his voice choked and missing its usual confident tone. "I truly regret it. If I could go back, I'd do everything differently. But I don't know what happened. It was as if some greater force inside me led me to this." The frog, already weak, managed to respond with a sad smile. "Don't worry, Leo. I think, in a way, I always knew this could happen. Sometimes we hope others will change, but maybe they simply can't." The two remained silent, merely letting the river carry them down. Bubbles rose to the surface as the water surrounded them, and in their final moments, Leo felt the weight of his choices. He realized that the trust Zika had given him was a rare gift, a gift he hadn't valued, perhaps because he didn't know how. The scorpion, who always thought only of himself, finally understood the impact of his impulses on those around him. As they sank together, the current took the frog's last breath and Leo's empty gaze into the depths of the river. Both were victims not just of a decision, but of their own essences. For the frog, kindness and a willingness to help were his marks, and for the scorpion, his venomous nature was his own undoing. The river then continued its course, calm as before, but carrying with it the story of Zika and Leo, which would later spread through the forest as a warning. The story of Zika, the kind-hearted frog, and Leo, the scorpion with a treacherous nature, is more than a simple fable. It's an invitation to reflect on human nature and the limits of change. What we learn from this tragic crossing goes far beyond the relationship between the two characters. It reminds us that, no matter how much someone wants to change or promises to act differently, there are aspects of our personalities and instincts that are nearly impossible to transform. Firstly, Zika teaches us the value of trust and compassion. Even suspicious and knowing Leo's reputation, he chose to believe that, with the right encouragement, the scorpion could overcome his nature and act responsibly. By helping the scorpion, Zika demonstrated a rare kindness, a willingness to give a second chance to someone many would judge unworthy of trust. This willingness is something we all admire and, in an ideal world, would like to have the courage to replicate. How often are we inclined to help someone, even knowing the risks involved? Zika's kindness and altruism are valuable virtues, showing us that, to build a more compassionate world, it's necessary to take the first step and offer support, even if it might put us in vulnerable situations. However, Leo represents the other side of this coin. His venomous nature is not only a physical trait but also a metaphor for those impulses and personality traits that often prevent us from doing what is right. Although he promised Zika he wouldn't hurt him, deep down, he knew that fighting his nature would be an immense challenge. And it's precisely here that the story warns us, even in the face of a promise of change, even with the best intentions, there are traits that deeply define who we are. Leo didn't sting Zika out of malice or lack of gratitude, but because, at the crucial moment, his essence spoke louder than his reason. He represents those parts of us that, even knowing the risks and consequences, end up acting according to old habits and impulses. With this lesson, we are led to reflect on the importance of self-knowledge and understanding how far we can really change. Sometimes, our nature is composed of traits developed over a lifetime, influenced by experiences, traumas, and contexts. These traits can be so deeply rooted that when trying to change them, we face internal resistance that is difficult to overcome. True change, the one that transforms who we are, isn't something that happens just with a promise or a fleeting desire, but requires a continuous effort and constant awareness of our actions and reactions. On the other hand, the story also brings a lesson about the importance of caution. Zika, in his kindness, may have underestimated the power that Leo's nature held over him. By agreeing to help the scorpion, the frog took a risk that, in a way, he himself intuited. This teaches us that, as much as we want to see the good in people, we need to be realistic and accept that some characteristics can be difficult to change. Trusting others is essential to build bonds and partnerships, but it's equally important to know when our trust can put us in danger. The moral of this story is therefore multifaceted and applicable to various life situations. It shows us that people don't always manage to change just with good intentions, and understanding this can prevent disappointments and even tragedies. Trust is fundamental, but it's equally important to observe and assess if the person we trust is truly willing and prepared to overcome their own limits. At the same time, it's an invitation to self-reflection. How far are we capable of going against what we consider our nature? How far are we willing to go to really change? Ultimately, the story of Zika and Leo reminds us that true change requires more than promises. It requires a profound inner transformation, a constant battle against those aspects we often deem uncontrollable. And like Leo, it's essential that each of us recognizes our own limits and challenges before asking for someone's trust. After all, as the story demonstrates, when we fail to act as promised, we end up not only harming others but also ourselves. It's a hard but necessary lesson about the limits of nature and the impact of our choices, both for those who trust and for those who need to fight against themselves not to fail. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more lessons like this, full of adventure and insights, don't miss the chance to join our community. Click on subscribe button right down here and join the channel. This way, you'll be the first to know when we publish new videos filled with stories and lessons that can help you see the world in a different light. And hey, it doesn't stop there. Turn on the notification bell to receive all updates and never miss any content. And if you found today's lesson valuable, leave a like to support the channel and share this story with someone who also needs to hear about trust and nature. Who knows, they might benefit from this learning too, right? See you in the next video.